360 camera. I apologize for the mosquitoes and the bugs on the window, but I figured this is going to be the easiest way. Now, I don't have people on about going to wind noise and external noise. I figured use the PA of the coach to help to explain and narrate what is going on. So we just left the community of Healy and we're heading northbound. Now, the camera is going to struggle a little because it's in the dark interior of us and the bright exterior of the daylight. But there's a couple of things going on that I wanted to capture in this lens. And I also wanted to explain about this because the ecology of this forest is incredibly important. First off, please don't be these guys. Hey, he's about to find out the hard way. We've got winner for the Darwin Awards trying ahead. Alright, so on the horizon, and I know right now it doesn't show too well, but you're noting that the sky might have a little bit of different color. Also, there's going to be points that I'm going to move the microphone because actually I should kill my interior fans, put it on recirc. We are traveling toward what's known as the Bear Creek Fire Complex. This is a complex of 3 fires. As of this morning at 0900 local time, the fire was 31,500 acres. The hotspots are on the south and on the east side of the fire, showing from the Fire Information Resource Management System, or FIRMS, which is provided through NASA. The flammability index was also not showing particularly good. The dust layer is fairly thick in this area because this is a very old growth area. As the forests evolve, the first thing in the forest life cycle is what's to the right of us. Now, it's kind of sporadic, so it's not a perfect point out of the life cycle of the forest. But the first evolution is the deciduous trees. So you'll have a fire that burns, or the forests are knocked down by man or beetle kill. And so the first thing is obviously the plants, the short plants, your wildfires, or flowers, wildfires. That didn't sound quite right. But you'll have all your underbrush, which is absolutely a haven for the moose, the caribou, the grizzly bear, and all of our wildlife. Well, the first big trees to actually take root are going to be the deciduous trees, owing to the fact that they historically grow a lot faster. They don't need to have the lengthy days of summer to be able to gain a millimeter or 2 that our black and white spruce do. And so as the plants give way to the trees, the canopy of these beautiful birch and cottonwoods, quaking aspens take root. It is still a haven for our moose and our caribou. But it becomes a little bit tricky for our black bears, or excuse me, not our blacks, but our grizzlies, because they prefer the open tundra areas looking for the berries and different plants that produce them, which a berry does not really produce well in shade. Again, I apologize about the very persistent cough. This is going to increase as we proceed toward the fire zone. Now, the wildlife will help keep the soil very nutrient rich because they maneuver through and they do their business, and nitrogen in the soil remains fairly good. Sunlight's still able to penetrate the canopy of these beautiful deciduous trees, and so the forest floor remains a fairly good haven. Well, slowly but surely, our evergreens start growing. Now, the evergreens are a much more tricky of the trees because they require between 90 to 120 days worth of sunlight each summer, and we really don't get a lot of sunlight. Okay, you see, you just said, wait a second, though, you live in the land of the midnight sun, you're only a few days away or out of the summer solstice. You don't get much sun. Well, on average, the black spruce need 100 days of a growing season, that is, sees the sun, in order to add a couple of millimeters to these trees that you see. They can grow a couple inches sometimes, but for the most part, it's very slow the process. And so the trees that you're seeing in this region are actually a very old growth. You're seeing trees that are 100 to 150 years old. Well, that means that this beautiful underbrush, the understory of these forests, become what's known as a duff layer. That layer is consistent of our lichens and our mosses, a little bit of our grasses that are able to grow into that darker region of the forest. It is not near the haven of the moose because it is a lot less vegetation and a lot less nutrients. And so these big, huge swaths of these black forests, the black spruce and the white spruce, these evergreens, actually push out some of our wildlife. You see the foxes, you might see our snowshoe hares, you might see some of the ground squirrels, but because of the long duration of, or the depth of the shadows, it does not allow for a lot of our large wildlife. And because of that, the soils become nutrient poor and it slowly dissipates. So the black spruce require a purging, and those fires that we're now stopping at a flag stop for are no exception for that purging. Now, it's a terrible thing because the fires do decimate the areas. They do create a lot of pollutions, a lot of difficult breathing, as you're hearing me actually fight with the breathing. They do create a scarred landscape. It's not a pretty landscape. But the carbons and the nitrogens and all of the nutrients that the fire creates into the surface of the soil helps rejuvenate these forests and allow it to grow back very healthy. And so the fire that we're sitting at the flag stop for is a necessary part of the ecology of the area. Now, Alaska has got a let it burn policy. I don't know if the other vehicles are able to pull over, but there is a fire truck that is inbound. Pull over. Pull over, people. And the fire truck actually has a light bulb out. And so I figured, well, we're stopped here. First off, let me see if I've got cell service to pull up firms. And we'll zoom in on to the fire that we're sitting at right now. I do believe that's the Milchnik fire. The hardest part about firms is that I need to actually put it as the topo, because it's a little bit easier to find Fairbanks and to find the fires that you're looking for. So right now the hot spots they're showing on firms. I don't know if this is actually going to show. So this line right here is the Parks Highway. You've got these red dots on the map. These are the satellite hotspots they're showing. The boundary of this fire is huge. So again, I don't know if it shows very well, but right here is the boundary layer. And so all this orange is the actual boundary. You got the Nenana sitting right beside. You got the Parks Highway corridor. Now, just to the north end, just as a kind of tap, I've got two friends and their family that live right up here, right near the Rexana Bridge. And I don't know if it's mapped, it does show, yeah, it actually does show Piano Avenue. Okay, so as of right now, I don't show any hotspots, but it is pretty close. So the boundary layer is all of this. So with the smoke that I'm seeing, we're probably gone up a little bit in RRH. Hey, so let me zoom in. Come on down. Do, 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 do. Alright, so reading the verbatim off of the Alaska Fuels and Fires Information Center, poor visibility from thick smoke made it difficult for aircraft to assist with firefighting operations. Nevertheless, water scoopers and tankers were able to assist fire operations by dropping water and retardant. At 1300, the fire began to cross Parks Highway, leading to the closure of the highway until 2300. when the highway reopened for traffic guided by pilot car. North 40 Rex Trail, Rexana, Windy Hills, June Creek, and Kobe Egg Road remain under a level 3 GO evacuation order. The latest management locale GPS is 64.04247 by minus 149.24288. Now, resource management within Alaska fires are very interesting. This is a full structure fire. So what they're going to do is they're going to remain an active and a very aggressive attack on all points. Now it does show that the strategy is monitor because of visibility and difficult wind conditions over the past few hours. There are a couple of fires to the north of Fairbanks that are on a level 2 or a level 3. And so on a level 2, it's fought aggressively on one side. They will have assets sitting on all sides, but the fighting remains on one side. That is owing to the fact that on the side that the fire is not being actively attacked from does not have human life or property intimate in danger. Then a level 3, they're going to monitor it at 24 hours, 365 until the fire burns out. But they're not going to attack it or fight it because the fires, like I said, are a very important part of our ecosystem within here in Alaska. The final little thing about the management is there are fires that will burn throughout the state that they don't even really monitor very close. They'll overfly it once a week. Just get fire mapping. Most of those nowadays, because of the increase in fire mapping aided through NASA, will allow firefighters and the fire department to be able to make educated decisions of if they're going to change the management level of a fire. This, like I said, one that we're sitting on is a very aggressively fought fire because there is multiple subdivisions and human life and property in imminent danger. There are multiple fires up in the Fairbanks region that are currently underneath the same management. The last status that I heard of this fire, there is 3 teams that are fighting this. It is going to be very interesting to see the actual fire in play, because most of the time when we get to drive through these fire zones, you're looking at the smoke and you're looking at an area and you can see the burn. The hot spots may not show that it's right up against the road, but the trouble with the hotspot management system that I just showed through firms is that it's satellite induced. And so people that are closer to the fire will look to see if there is a closer hotspot. So they'll use low-level thermal drones in order to get a further mapping. For 5 seconds, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that the camera has downloaded the footage onto my laptop. I am trying to take care of 8 birds with 1 stone. While I'm driving, my camera has been uploading footage to the laptop, and I'm editing footage for video. This will be one of the videos that will be edited on the fly. Check 1, 2, check 1, 4. Alright, well that's a good sign towards the vehicle I just saw come through. I should almost see if I can mess with the driver that's behind me. Stand by. Check 1, 2, check 1, 4. Poker, check 1, 2, check 1, 4. I don't know if I'm close enough. I'm hoping that one car is a good sign. If I'm close enough and it bled through, he's going, what in the world? His PA is going nuts. You have to have fun. So, I'm curious here. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Okay, so it does see. Good. That means that the explanations do work. Let's see. Because I'm actually not seeing any hotspots on this management. Alright, let's pull up Wendy. Get a geolocation here. Come on, geolocate me. There you go. Alright, so the really good thing is humidity is at 72%, winds at 175 at 0 knots, gusts to 2 knots, 64 degrees Fahrenheit, showing 65 on my dash, dew point 54.8. Up north of us, humidity at 91%, wind at 0 degrees at 1 knot, gust of 2 knots, temperature at 60 degrees Fahrenheit with the dew point at 57.9. So very, very calm, which is very good. AQ in Anderson was at 46. AQ at Ferry, which we're right at, is 22. That is 40 minutes ago. So a pretty good high relative humidity is helping with the fires, fighting it. Will definitely help. So let's bring up our reported precipitation. We do have mostly cloudy skies over top of the region with an active system in Anderson, which is north of us. We also have an active system in Denali to the south of us. Alright, so right now expected humidity is to remain pretty high throughout the evening and into tomorrow until right around 1200. and it starts dropping by about 2000. It'll be extremely dry, but then rain moves back into the area on Wednesday. Let me compare that with the European model. And same trend, only is a little less drier. With the humidities remaining above the 50% on the European model until about 1800, 30%. And then rain moves into the area until Tuesday at 1000. Humidities at the ground level will drop, and it fluctuates between a moist night and a very dry day. Now, I'm not going to run too long of a wave, because the longer out you are, the much worse that accuracy. The North American model, the NAM, is also concurring with just this tomorrow evening being a dry spell, but it doesn't show as dry, and then it will pick back up in the humidity levels. Our ground winds, using the North American model, winds pick up throughout the morning, and they're going to remain northerly until later in the day on Tuesday. Right now, we've got a nice southerly wind. Nothing too fast. European model actually is confirming that, with winds moving to the east and then switching to the south during the day on Tuesday. Morning time on Wednesday, winds shift to the north and then change as the day progresses. Temperatures at ground level using the European model are remaining at the 70s. On Tuesday morning will be right around the 75. This guy is running back to his vehicle. Awesome. So about 1 minute. Looks like traffic release will be shortly. One of the guys was just talking with the flagger. Looks like between 1 to 5 minutes.
Copy that. Thanks for the update.
You're welcome. Also, fire mapping system shows all the hot spots to the south of the fire. It is a slow advance currently. Fire trend should be moderate to light. Hopefully it remains that way. Tomorrow is actually going to be the aggressive behavior again, but that won't affect us too much.
Ten-4.
All right. We be rocking, we be rolling. I know it's probably not the prettiest video in the world. Just sitting waiting for traffic release. But once we get rolling, should make for some very interesting footage. And I hope that the explanation does help the understanding about the ecology of our forests and how this all works together. So yeah, none of us like seeing the fires, but it's a necessary evil. I will say that my lungs will be much happier getting out of the smoke, but the smoke will remain persistent up into Fairbanks. That might be our pilot vehicle. Zone, I do use my hazards, so there will be that consistent
Hannigan entering Otter Lake Road.
Alright, so the way they manage pilot vehicles for fires is we're not immediately at the edge of the fire zone. We've got a little ways to drive before we're in the active flame. This is not the ground zero. However, this is definitely going to be a very interesting experience. Now, I've drove through fire zones plenty of times, and it's like I've actually told the story of how I got interested in photography, as well as how I got interested in the fire resource management. And I might as well go ahead and tell this story as well. And laptop is gonna probably take a bugger. Okay, I can't stop on the fire zone. So growing up, my family would fly fish the Yellowstone River every single year. And we absolutely loved Yellowstone National Park. Yellowstone National Park is a haven for wildlife. And my mom always carried a camera. Well, Yellowstone National Park, 1988, very dry year. And we had a ton of what's known as dry lightning storms. To this day, if I am in a region that has a dry lightning storm, I do have the tendency of being on edge. Because the Lewis Lake fire was started as we first entered the park. I remember being camped there, and it was flash boom, flash boom, flash boom. And at this point, I am 7 years old. So I'm not really that old in the grand scope of things. The electricity was so intense that literally sitting at the table and just watching, you could feel all of the hairs on your body just raise. It was static electricity like I've never experienced. We got up that morning, and when a fire is burning, there are multiple classifications of movement of a fire. One of them is crowning. Basically, the fire will burn, and it will burn tree to tree, and it will crown, and it will jump to the next tree. That's what this fire was doing, is it would burn, crown, jump, and burn, crown, and jump. Now this is lodgepole. These are the big, tall lodgepole pines that are pervasive within that area. They also do not have a very deep root system. But we got up and were watching it crown tree to tree to tree to tree. We got up into the central part of the park, and we would always fly fish the Yellowstone. We'd also go looking at wildlife up in the Hayden Valley area. And we would make a tradition to go see Old Faithful. Old Faithful was closed down, and you literally could not find a single strand of wildlife in the park because some of the smoke was so thick that I would not be able to see the car in front of us right now. Well, heading out of the park. At this point, I've taken all the film from my sister. I was running an old Point and Shoot 110 then. The old film that looked like the spectacles. And they had used all that film. Well, I remember sitting in the back seat of our old 85 Ford Thunderbird, and literally you could not see the hood of the car. Smoke was so intense. But as we were getting closer to the Lewis Lake area, next thing that we saw was literal flame arcing over top of the car. We were driving through a literal tunnel of flame. The heat inside the car was incredible. you could not run the AC cold enough. We got a little ways and we got to the south gate. We literally had just cleared the south gate. My dad had the radio on, and we left the south gate, and as soon as we passed through, we heard a call: South gate is now closed. All traffic is diverted to East Gate. So we were literally the last people out. The fires definitely changed the landscape. The next year, it was just tree trunks and that brown vegetation. And we watched a lot of the tree trunks over the next few years fall. Now, Yellowstone is substantially further south, and so growing takes a little bit less energy. And so the recovery of those beautiful lodgepoles is slightly quicker. Now, I don't know if the 360 camera is catching this. Off to our right or left, we do have in this deep black spruce here, first column of flame. And I'm noting a few columns of flame active. And this is what's known as a creeping fire. Right now, the RHs are pretty high, which is going to moisten down this very dry and sappy black spruce. Also, the bog level raises, and so the activity of the fire remains minimal and bedded down. If the RH would have changed and dropped, and it can, and it's going to, then what will happen is the fire changes from this nice little bedded down creeping, where it's just kind of eating a little bit of the duff layer and the lower vegetation, to it will start becoming a running or a torching. And literally it's going to be just running between tree and tree, actively engulfing each of these trees very aggressively and very fast. And I did say that these black spruce are very sappy and very explosive. When you are sitting near these, if you were to cut it down, you're going to feel a ton of sap. There's a little bit of active flame, nice little duff layer that is burning right here on the side. And you're seeing this burned area now directly in front and to the left. This area is a creeping and a perfect flame, showing this nice creeping behavior. It's not actively torching the trees, it's not crowning to the top, it's just creeping and slowly ebbing through this forest and this lower brush. There's a ton of human life property in this area. And so they're working on trying to keep this corridor clear. And what you're seeing up against the side of the road is you're seeing a very distinct line. This is a fire line or a fire break. They're using fire to help to fight the fire, keep it from jumping and traversing this highway. I'm seeing a little bit more of these burnt black spruce. Now, fire behavior again is very minimal. So these nice little puffs of smoke that you're seeing are burning into the duff layer and into the understory of the fire. It's going to produce a bunch of smoke, and it's actually very hard to combat that nice deep duff, because the fire is not on the top of this understory. If it was remaining at the top of these trees, then what you would have is a perfect way of fighting it, because you can just dump water right on it. When it gets settled deep in this depth layer, it becomes incredibly difficult, because the depth layer holds that nice heat of the fire, and it will burn laterally across. It's not just a horizontal burn like these trees, and it remains bedded deep down in this undergrowth. Now, one of the big things about Alaskan fire or forests is we've got a really interesting root system as well. A good portion of these black spruce fire or root systems also run laterally. It says they're running laterally. They are going to also hold the heat, and they will produce a kind of underground fire. It is extremely difficult to spot these hot spots, and extremely difficult to put them out, because it might be 5 to 10 feet below the surface of the soil. So the forest fighters or the firefighters have to actually dig down into the deep depth, find these hot spots, and extinguish them. So when I showed the fire map from Firms before we rolled in, and I showed the Parks Highlight Corridor, and I said the hot spots, the active ones, were toward the south and toward the west, we've seen hot spots as we've been driving. And there's where the thermal imaging of the satellites cannot touch. And low-level thermal drones assist in the mapping of these very difficult areas. Now, as we get a little bit further, we're going to enter the 2-lane. Now, first off, and somewhere in this region, dang, I wish I knew the exact milepost. One of my friends purchased property on the left-hand side. It is non-connected. As far as I'm aware, they've never built on that property. So, their property probably got burned, but hopefully, if I'm correct, they've not built on that property. And did mention that I've got 2 friends on the north end of this burn zone, that their property is at massive risk. And with the winds variable, and with the RH is variable, right now is the only time that these forest fighters are going to have a good chance to actively attack this fire. It's a very difficult thing. So, I've got my fingers crossed that my friends up on Piano Lane, Daryl and Cynthia Mudge, music directors, Tri-Valley Music Department, and their family, that their property is protected. Now, because of the aggressiveness of this fire, from updates, 6 structures have been lost. And you can see multiple spots where it has jumped the highway. And because of the variable winds, the variable RHs, as well as the very, very dry conditions that we've had. So as for the fact that, like I referenced, this is an old growth forest. In a few miles, we're going to cross over the Nenana. you're gonna think this beautiful river would be a great fire break. Because how can a fire jump this river? Well, unfortunately, it only takes one ember, one spark, and if we get an active torching run, it's going to jump. And it's going to jump aggressively. And it won't take much for the entire community of Anderson and Clear Space Force Base is at risk. So they're going to have assets sitting on the north side of this, actively entrenching themselves, running dozer lines and fire lines to assist in keeping this fire from actively aggressing to this north side. As well as we've got the Kobe Egg Residential Division, which is pretty substantial. And so this is not an easy situation. And driving through this is not a very fun experience. Not only am I feeling the effects of the wildfire smoke, but this is really hitting home how close individual lives and friends that I have over the many years that I've been here in Alaska are affected right now. And that's what makes, again, I'm gonna finally finish into the long duration project that I have been working on. And phase 2 of that video, I'm gonna watch it and do the final edits, make sure it looks good before I post it. By the way, this right here, Piano Avenue, is Daryl and Cynthia Bunch, Tri-Valley Music Department. The preservation, ecology, education, and protection, as well as keeping everything intact. And I got asked a very unique question last night by one of the other Premier drivers. And they asked me, so Steve, with your understanding of the fire science and the ecology of these forests, why do we fight these fires? Because the fires rejuvenate and repopulate this beautiful land that we're driving through. And it's like, oh my goodness, we're driving through this fire zone and it's sad and it's gloomy. But then you see the rejuvenation and it's glorious. In the next few years, this region will be just teeming with life. You're going to have the fireweed and the lupine and the Arctic daisies. You're going to have the mooks. All of these small animals start flocking to this area because there's food and there's beautiful, like abundant resources. How come we're so gun shy? And it's the lower 48 got gun shy with fires burning. By the way, this is the Nanaimo. This is the fire that, or the river that I said that you would expect it not to jump over. This business is closed. I'm actually surprised that there's a camper there. are now really struggling. And honestly, I need to tie in some drone footage and some video footage of the spruce bark beetle kill in Alaska. And again, you're thinking, okay, wait a second. How's this all linking together? Where are you going with this? So, the spruce bark beetle infestation is owing to the fact that these forests are extremely old growth. And because they're extremely old growth, they have not been rejuvenated and they're very dry. The older the wood, the better it burns. A young sapling does not do as good, and the fire pit is an old tree. It's an old tree, it's been seasoned and is dry. That's a lot of our fire or forests now. Old growth. And human populations have encroached in so much of our forests that these fires are becoming harder and harder to deal with. If this was back in the 1800s, you don't have the encroachment levels that is now modern era. And it's a difficult situation. It winds up becoming yet another $1 trillion question. How do you protect the human life and property in these amazing regions where we want to live? Alaska is that ultimate destination of you've got the most amazing places because we can dream, we can build. I mean, the sky's the limit. Look around the amount of forest and the amount of land is untouched, and having acres and having to not have an next door neighbor that's 20 foot out your window, such a blessing. And it's an amazing thing. But yet, once again, it's a tricky thing because you want to encourage people to live their dreams. Myself included. But then we build a pocket of civilization in the middle of this forest, and so then it can't go through its cycle, so nature has to find a different way to rejuvenate that forest. And if it doesn't get rejuvenated, we're in for problems. And so logging and clear cutting are the definite option. But then again, you get the outcry of you're decimating the forest. Well, are you replanting? Are you doing something to be a steward of this land? And again, I'm talking about Alaska proper, but it scopes, grand scope, so much further than Alaska. These lessons and these thought processes need to be placed in effect worldwide. So you can't have a all-inclusive fight every fire if it's not going to threaten human life or property. And we also need to set aside some swaths of land that are these forests and these ecosystems to protect them so that they can go through their natural cycles. that's where it really, really becomes a difficult stewardship question. From land ownership to land maintenance. Perseverance in education. And it just brings down, I guess, the trillion-dollar question that I'll leave with this slightly unique video. I don't know where this channel is going to be going in the next year or so, but I feel like I am posing some pieces of a puzzle that really need to be thought of, not just for Alaska. It is obviously impacting me directly and the peoples up here in Alaska. But it's not just Alaska that needs to ask this question. How is you as a person, you is your community, you is your city or municipality, and you is your county, you as your state, and you as your nation being a good and responsible steward to the land that we live on and are a part of, and whether you like it or not, have been given a responsibility to be a steward of what's around us. And it's a difficult thing because in the modern era, we're flying down the highway, working our 9-to-5 jobs, and going home and watching our TVs and our movies or whatever, and looking up on the internet or whatever. You're not getting out and seeing the big picture. There's a bigger picture in what you realize. That's the hardest thing I can say. And so, as I'm closing just outside of Anderson, and not out of the woods about the fire zones, not out of the woods with the smoke either. How are you being a good steward? Are you really doing your part in the grand scope of this land, of taking care of what we've been privileged to have? That's my $1 trillion question to you. Hopefully this all makes sense. You know that the 360 actually gives you a good view and give me some input, because this is a different camera, slightly different way of doing it, and I'm almost thinking that my final part of my Weird series in Melbourne might be filmed from this camera. So I also want some input on the camera. Anywho, I hope it makes sense.